A few chapters before this, a guy named Cornelius and his household was baptized. A Gentile Roman centurion of the Italian cohort was baptized, and the gospel made the leap from being Jewish to now having one Gentile. The church in Antioch had a few Gentiles, but now we see the church is now going to become mostly Gentile as the gospel moves from just being Jewish to being for outsiders as well. And the second thing that happens is that the Jewish leaders, the religious leaders, they're actively opposed and they begin to slander and argue with Paul and Barnabas. And it wasn't because it was theology, like, oh, we've got a difference in theology. What was it? These guys were jealous, right? Like their weak sermons could not draw this crowd, but the gospel of Jesus Christ and God working through it drew the whole town to hear this message, and they begin to actively oppose and undermine. They eventually get some of the women in their synagogue who are Gentiles, but they fear God. They say, hey, get your husbands. We want to kick these guys out, and they remove them from the district. And I think if we're thinking application, guys, most opposition to the mission of Jesus may not come from inside of us or outside the church. It usually comes from saints. It can come from people who know, and churches who know the Lord, right? Like we have issues, don't we? Sometimes, for those of you who know Jesus, we can be divisive, we can undermine, we can critique each other. And a couple examples, and again, if I say something that it's you, like don't think I'm thinking about you, but maybe the Lord is saying something to you. But maybe it's a small group leader who tries to encourage their group to open up seats so that outsiders can come in. And the group actively undermines that leader because they don't want to let go of what they have. Maybe it's somebody who criticizes the church for trying to update and trying to modernize itself because they like it the way it was, even though we're trying to reach new people. Maybe it's a pastor who preaches the gospel instead of reading a commentary on Sunday, as Kyle does, right? So some churches, and again, this is not a bad thing. What they do is they read a commentary. They say the Greek word is this, and this is this, and this is this, and they don't actually preach and apply the text in a winsome and hopeful way. Maybe it's one church slandering another because they have a different secondhand belief about something that at the end of the day doesn't even matter, and they call them out as heretics. Man, we can be the most divisive people in the world, and a lot of opposition to the mission comes from inside the church. As sad as that is to say. And if you don't know Jesus, I'm not trying to slam the church. Like the church is beautiful. There's such amazing community and love inside of it, but we are still in process. And we need God's help in that. And even if you think about it, even though the Romans killed Jesus, who planned his death? Who demanded it? It was God's people. Saints killed God's son. Jesus died because of them, didn't he? And Jesus, when he died, like I said earlier, we are sinful. We're broken. To be sinful means to reject God as God. But when Jesus died, he paid for that debt. He took away our sin. He cleansed us of all unrighteousness, even of the ways that we try to trip each other up, even of the ways that we try to criticize brave men and women who are doing their best to make disciples of Jesus, even if they look a little bit different than us. Jesus died even for that. And at the end of the day, guys, it's easier to take shots from the cheap seats than to get on the field and play the game, isn't it? It's just, for me, it's easier to criticize somebody who's trying to do something than actually go and to do it myself. We are called to go and make disciples. And a lot of us, we don't want the opposition, right? Like, I don't want the discomfort of my neighbors rejecting me and not talking to me for months. Like, I don't want the discomfort of somebody not wanting to have a relationship or having to give up some of my personal time to be a disciple maker. But at the end of the day, we're called to face that opposition because Jesus did, didn't he? Like, that's all that Christ faced was opposition from men and women, even disbelief from his. How many of his disciples were at the cross? You can count them on one finger. Everybody else stayed away from him, except for John and Jesus' mother, right? And Mary. I guess that'd be 3 total. But what's interesting, guys, is that Jesus died for us. He died for our sin, and he faced opposition on our behalf, and he calls us as believers, just like these guys, to face opposition and to push through. Because what happens is as you face opposition, it pulls you closer to Jesus. If you didn't know this, is you begin to identify with his life and his death and everything that he went through. And again, I want to also encourage you guys. I know some of you guys are doing a great job at making disciples, and you're examples to the rest of us, but we all have room to improve. And for the rest of us, there is a call to go and make disciples, not to criticize people who are doing their best to do it.